What we're missing, China, it's not that China's catching up to America, it's that we now need to catch up to China.
China! We were losing to China. We want to beat China.
There is a phrase President Xi likes to use.
当前，世界正处于百年未有之大变局。
I believe this phrase truly captures what the world is going through, and I feel people are not paying attention. I feel like we are in one of those moments that our grandparents or parents always tell us about, how some events shifted the world dynamics in their time, and how the world was never the same. Alright, enough of my rambling, so let's start with what literally just dropped. China just took the #1 spot on the top 500 list.
Welcome back. China clinching the top spot over the United States for the first time since 2017 for the world's most powerful supercomputer. Beijing's Line Shine, which relies entirely on central processing units, achieved a 20% faster computing speed than America's El Capitan.
For those who don't know, the top 500 is the official global leaderboard of the world's most powerful supercomputers. Published twice a year, been running since 1993. It's the most prestigious benchmark in high-performance computing. And China's new machine, called Line Shine, sitting at the National Supercomputing Center in Shenzhen, just dethroned America's El Capitan. By more than 20%, 2.198 exaflops of performance. That's 2.198 quintillion calculations per second. The first machine in history to cross the 2 exaflop threshold. Now, here's where this gets genuinely remarkable. Line Shine doesn't use a single GPU. Not one. Zero. No NVIDIA, no Western accelerators. Nothing that the US sanctions were designed to protect.
This is a major achievement. It's the first publicly verified system to sustain more than 2 exaflops in what we call double precision, 64-bit floating point arithmetic, and it achieved roughly 80% of its theoretical peak performance, and that's a very high number to achieve. Many machines achieve much less than that, usually around 60–65% of the theoretical peaks.
All built on domestically designed ARM-based processors manufactured entirely within China. And just to be clear about what that means strategically, the US has spent years cutting China off from advanced chip technology specifically to prevent something like this from happening. The entire premise of the export control strategy was no advanced chips, no advanced computing, no AI dominance. And China just built the world's most powerful supercomputer without touching a single piece of banned technology. One of the organizers of the top 500 list, Jack Dongara, said it plainly. Export controls may slow China's access to certain advanced components, but they also provide a strong incentive to develop domestic alternatives. In other words, the sanctions didn't stop China. They funded China's R&D into replacing everything the sanctions were trying to deny them. Sound familiar? It should, because we talked about basically the same story in our last video on how Huawei's new development in chip technology, it's catching the world with its pants down. And it's becoming a pattern that's impossible to ignore. But here's what I want to do today, because the supercomputer story by itself is interesting, but it only scratches the surface of what's actually happening. Because while I was going through the research for this video, I kept coming back to this professor, Robert Pape, University of Chicago, one of the most serious academic voices on great power competition in the world. And he did something that almost nobody in his position does anymore. He actually went to China.
The most important thing that's going to come out of this trip is the world is about to rediscover China in ways they are going to be blown away. I was touring China's advanced industries 2 weeks, and China is just simply becoming an AI juggernaut. And so what China is doing is they are massively integrating AI, electrification, robotics, infrastructure in cities.
Not for a few days, not for a conference, 2 weeks, 18 hours a day, on factory floors, in boardrooms, at university presentations, at dinners with executives, in cities like Wuhan, Hangzhou, Shenzhen. And what he came back saying has been rattling around in my head ever since I read it. He said China is not catching up to America. He said America needs to catch up to China. And he said we're probably 10 to 20 years behind. Not in any single product, not just in one technology, in the entire way a society gets organized around technology.
Like this, but what China's doing is they're not just uplifting a DeepSeek or an Alibaba. They are creating webs of doing that. But 90% of this is happening in a much broader context where they're taking, say, a St. Louis and they're uplifting the whole area. They're taking a Pittsburgh, they're uplifting the whole city. They're taking Detroit and they're uplifting the whole city.
Let me explain what he means by that, because this is the part that most people miss. When we talk about the tech race with China, we tend to think about it like a product race. Who has the better AI model? Who has the faster chip? Who won this benchmark? And that framing, Pape says, is completely wrong. It's what he calls a soda straw view. You're looking through a tiny tube at one specific thing while the entire landscape around it is transforming in ways you can't see. What China is actually doing, what Pape saw on those shop floors, is integrating AI, electrification, robotics, and infrastructure not just into companies, but into entire cities. City after city, places he first saw in 1979 as fishing villages, now completely rebuilt from the ground up around digital infrastructure. Pape's point is that this is happening everywhere, simultaneously, in cities of 10 million people. It's not a pilot program. It's not a tech demo. It's deployed, at scale. And that's what we can't see from behind our computers in America.
What we're missing, China, it's not that China's catching up to America, it's that we now need to catch up to China. They've uplifted about 50 to 100 million people in the last 6 years. What have we done for our Rust Belt? What have we really done for Erie, Pennsylvania, where I was born, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, Detroit, Baltimore? They look almost exactly the same, and in many ways worse than they did 6 years ago. What has China done? They have invested up, and we're missing the big picture.
50 to 100 million people have been uplifted this way in just the last 6 years. China isn't bragging about this. They're not showing it off. They're staying completely under the radar. And Pape said that tells him more than almost anything else. Because when you're ahead, you don't need to talk about it. You just keep working. Now, you might be wondering, why aren't American journalists and politicians seeing this? Pape tried to get journalists interested in what he'd seen last June. Nobody could find the time, because it wasn't on the radar. And that information vacuum, that willful blindness, is where a lot of America's strategic confusion about China comes from. If your job involves understanding your competition, you can't understand what's happening from behind a computer screen. You have to actually go. And now, layer on top of all of this what's happening geopolitically. While America has been dealing with trade wars, tariff chaos, the Iran situation, domestic political turmoil, China has been doing what Xi Jinping calls playing for changes unseen in 100 years. When Trump launched his first trade war, China's exports to the US dropped about 20%. But here's what happened at the same time. Exports to India jumped nearly 13%, to Southeast Asia up 13.5%, to the EU up 8.4%. China didn't panic, it diversified. And while the US was rattling tariff sabers, leader after leader started making quiet pilgrimages to Beijing. Canada's Mark Carney, European leaders, Southeast Asian heads of state, all of them essentially sending the same signal. We want a hedge against the United States. On Chinese social media, there's a nickname they've given Trump, and I love this, Chuanjianguo, which translates roughly as Trump the nation builder. Not a nation builder for America, a nation builder for China. The joke being, every time Trump does something chaotic on the world stage, China's position gets stronger relative to everyone else. Now, this isn't a story about a perfect China that has everything figured out, like every country. It deals with their own issues. But here's the thing, China also has a plan. And right now, the plan seems to be working better than the lack of one. Whether you're worried about this, or excited about it, or somewhere in between, you can't have an informed opinion about the most consequential technological competition of the 21st century if you're not actually looking at what's happening. China is not the country it was 10 years ago. It's not the country it was 5 years ago. And if the last few weeks of news are any indication, it might not even be the country it was 6 months ago. The world is changing faster than our mental models of it, and the countries and the people who update their models fastest are going to be the ones who navigate what comes next. Let me know what you think in the comments, if you agree or disagree with my assessment. Also, before I go, I want to thank you all for the support in the last video. Every bit of support is highly appreciated, especially for a small channel like this one. And for the newcomers, thanks for being here. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video if you enjoyed. See you in the next one.